Good afternoon. Welcome, as always. Firstly, I was just asking Olivier. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I was just asking Olivier, who of course is the CEO of Kasada, where he was. I had assumed Johannesburg, but he tells me he's one of the few people who have managed to get on an aircraft and make it all the way to Paris. So he's in Paris with no clear idea of when he's going to get back to Johannesburg, which is the state of our travel industry today, I guess. So how do you find being back in Paris? How long has it been since you've traveled, Olivier?
Well, hi Nick. It's a pleasure as always. At least to see you. Yes, it has been just a few days that I managed to come back with a number of meetings in Paris, and that's the issue we all have, how to be efficient, and every week you have new information. So how you can travel, where to base, how to be able to continue your business, to, if possible, meet people. That's what we all do in our industry, and this situation is of course very challenging for all of us. So I managed to come back to France, but with no visibility on when and how I will be able to go back to South Africa. But at least I expect that from Paris, in the coming days, coming weeks, there might be hopefully some flight and more possibility to travel at least to West Africa and a number of countries.
And how long have you been in Johannesburg? Were you in lockdown down there? Obviously, were you sort of in the office or working from home? What have you been doing with the team?
Well, there was quite a serious lockdown with a curfew and army, and so it has been taken very seriously at the early days. So we work remotely, then we reopened the office when it was possible, but of course, still taking the safety of all our employees and partners very seriously. So we opened, but with a lot of measures in place.
Olivier, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the third year that we've met on stage, so it's becoming a bit of a tradition. Obviously, we normally do this in person, but we can't, despite the fact that we're not that far apart. We can't this year. I guess, listening to what you're saying about the situation in South Africa and the fact that you're not sure when you're going to get back, the question I wanted to sort of ask you at the opening was, do you see this crisis as something to manage your way through and look out on the other side and say all that's happening is it might be delaying our strategy and our plans a little, or do you see it differently? Is there opportunity coming out of this? One of the quotes that we're hearing a lot is, never waste a crisis. I'm just wondering how you and David are looking at this crisis and how Kasada are viewing Africa at this stage.
Yeah, Nick, this is the third session, you're right, that we have together. 18 months ago in Nairobi, the first one, and it was the hot seat session when you called me on last minute, and it was then the opportunity to present the concept, because at that time it was only the concept of Kasada and what was the idea behind. Last week in Kigali, and it was the perfect timing because we were last year, so we were engaging in number of discussion with some partners, so to explain our approach, how to deploy capital, and that's what we did. So we had a number of transactions, we engaged some due diligence, we spent a lot of time and money, and in fact our target was to announce in April, May, some interesting transaction to celebrate the 1 year after the first close of the fund. Then, of course, there is a lot of change with what is happening. But first of all, the strategy is still there. So all the good reason to do Kasada and to bridge the gap between the local partners and the institutional financial institution is even more than ever needed. And we have a long-term view. So for us, it's about the quality of the asset, the quality of the partner, the location. It's not driven by a pure financial approach with the view that we can get a better price and then everything is fine and we look for an exit. So our approach is rather than how to extract value, this is how to contribute and how to create value on the long term with a number of partners. That's our focus. That's what we do. So crisis, opportunity, I don't like to use the word because, you have a number of people on the front line, you have a number of people suffering today, so I don't think that this is appropriate. However, this is a very important momentum where our mission as Kasada and the role that we can play in the market, this is where I believe that we have to play and to take our responsibility, and this is what we like to achieve. So does it mean that the crisis is for us to put on hold and wait and see? Not at all. This is how to accelerate, meaning to speak to a lot of DFIs and banks, to a lot of partners, to see what is missing and how we can facilitate and be a solution provider to help the industry and for us to deploy some capital.
So earlier today, and by the way, I fully understand your sentiment around using the crisis in the sense of calling it an opportunity. I think everyone shares that view. It's very difficult to talk about these things from a financial perspective when you know that there are, extraordinary challenges, and we've talked about those quite extensively today. And in fact, this morning I was talking with Mark Willis, your old colleague from Accor, and just what he was seeing, and just touching on South Africa. We were talking about the extraordinary decline in airline traffic. I don't know if you've heard the statistic, but in Q2 this year, South Africa saw a decline to 0.5% traffic through airports in South Africa. I mean, the number is so small that it almost doesn't register, and you can hardly believe it. Now, you can obviously believe it because you've just been through an airport in South Africa and you know how challenging it is. But you look across the continent, there's a general view, and we heard again in a panel today from the WHO, that the expectation is that Africa is possibly lagging by 6 to 8 weeks where Asia was. So the pandemic hasn't reached a peak, and it's unclear how bad it will be, but obviously it's very concerning. When you look across the continent, you just mentioned earlier that you were, now in Paris, you can get to West Africa. Where do you see the focus? Is it possible to distinguish particular areas to focus on at the moment? And the other question I had, which came about from the discussion with Mark, was he said how Accor were working very closely with owners, trying to help them with banks and funders, trying to ensure that they remain solvent. Do you see that sort of partnership as something that represents an entry point for Kasada and perhaps represents a greater entry point than might have existed, say, at this time last year?
Yeah, I think you. First of all, talking about the situation. Well, either you can just comment on numbers and say that that's fact and there is nothing you can do against it. I think that you can also take a more proactive approach, and you can see also what is at stake in different countries in Africa. And often there is the view that the business travel, the mice with the big event and the large corporate will probably take a while before having this again, and that's quite universal. So in Africa, I think that this is also the right momentum for all key market players to focus on the domestic/regional market and to see how the points that were under discussion prior to the COVID-19 crisis and that were weaknesses or room for opportunities, how we can accelerate this. So how in terms of visa regulation, how the government with the airlines, how they can put in place at a regional level some coordination to ensure that you have some protocol to facilitate the travel. So if all the airlines are under pressure and bankrupt, that's another story. But at least in present circumstances, I believe that there is already a lot that can be done to facilitate the travel at a regional level. And from our perspective, the market that was perceived in Africa often as a pure business, international travelers, five-star hotel with an international brand focusing on five-star. I think that this is time, and this is where we can reinforce the focus on the emerging African middle class and the people traveling to Africa looking for affordable product with quality, with innovation and international brands. So we see a number of opportunities, and this is probably in the coming months and coming years where there will be more opportunities, we believe, in the market. Then we would like to see Kasada as a solution provider interacting with different market players. And we believe that you have different situations. So you have some owners which are under financial pressure, and I think that their key objective is to de-risk the personal liability. And there we can assist, we can help them to negotiate with the lenders. We can inject some cash, either from equity or structured financing. And then you have a number of players in the market. In fact, they would like to reduce their exposure to the COVID-19 crisis. Maybe hotel was not their core business, and they realize that our hotel is capital intensive and that this is a long and complex process, and especially with the crisis, there will be a lot of requirement in terms of cash and expertise. And this is also another category where we can help, we can provide equity, we can provide structured financing. So again, you're absolutely right. There is a number of challenges. There is a number of figures that are not so encouraging. But at the end of the day, there is a number of hotels in Africa. This is a wonderful industry, and I think we are all together to fight and to find some solution. And as Kasada, we like to be part of this and to propose some real and solutions.
So Olivier, one of the things that if you're looking at, the US and what's happened there post the crisis and Europe, there are already some very clear differences. You've seen a number of transactions in the US, which tends to be a market that moves far faster to deal with these type of things from a financial and investment perspective. In Europe, we know there's distress, but we haven't actually seen the consequences of that distress yet. And we know at the moment that there's definitely a unrealistic bid-ask spread. So the current owners' view on value and the rescue squad outside the door that's saying they're there to help have fundamentally different views of where value lies. Where do you see that in Africa at the moment? And given the relatively fragmented nature of ownership in Africa and the huge geography that you're looking at, how do you engage and reach owners that might need that or might welcome it? You've talked about that very opportunity and discussion that you could have without going on the road or being able to speak to people personally. Are you doing this all sort of remotely? What's your approach to this being? How do you do it from a practical perspective?
No, we are like everybody doing a lot of Zoom and other, but we are in constant discussion with a number of partners. So a single and easy answer to this very strategic question with different parts of the continent, it's quite challenging. But you're right, the US market is the most advanced, and in fact, what you realize is that you have this spread with between buyer and seller. So you have number of buyers expecting 30% discount, and you have a number of sellers where 10-15% seems to be the maximum that they're ready to consider. So you have this gap. Our view is a little bit different in Africa, where this exists for sure. So same view, but again, if you have a long-term view, and if you look at the quality of the asset and the partner and the growth potential, in fact, I think that rather than the discount, I mean, the good quality of asset, you cannot expect a significant discount, even if you still have to be realistic on the cash flow, because as Kasada, we have to deliver a solid business model with a return to investors. So this is valid, and we need to be realistic, and doing business plan on this period is, of course, a difficult exercise. However, what we see is that the number of people interested to discuss is wider. So in fact, the number of possibilities and in such circumstances, people are more open to test ideas, to open the door, to engage discussion. Does it mean that it will be easy and that there will be a good alignment of interest? Well, we have to be realistic, but we see, in fact, an increase in terms of discussion opportunities and people trying to see what kind of value we can bring and what kind of value of others can bring. And this is financial, but this is also operational, asset management, capex, how to help to finance, how to reopen the hotel, to provide the working capital, how to help in terms of safety protocols. So there is a number of aspects which are not only linked purely to cash, and that's what we see at the moment.
And Olivier, earlier on, you mentioned that had the crisis not occurred, your target was to announce certain deals this year. Were you sort of approaching a situation where you would have been able to successfully deploy capital this year, and are you saying that what has really happened is that's just been delayed, and those deals are being sort of reevaluated or repriced? I'm just trying to get a sense of how easy it is to spend this money, because we've touched on that before. It always struck me that it was a lot of money, but it might not be as easy as it looks to spend it, because of what you've just said. You have to hit return hurdles, and you have to get an agreement on valuation, whether that's in reasonable market conditions or unreasonable market conditions.
I'm sure that for a lot of people listening to us, the problem at the moment to spend money is something that might seem to be a little bit weird. No, we had, again, we were on track to announce some transaction on the first semester. Some transaction are on hold or will not materialize. Some I'm confident will materialize, but probably with some term and condition to be adjusted. And we have some new discussions. So our pipeline and our deals now are quite different from what they were 3 months ago. However, our target, even if there is a few months with the delay with the crisis, but our target to deploy some capital this year remains the same. So we are very confident in our capacity to do it. But then what exists, and the main challenge that we have is some time to do due diligence when you cannot travel, to get the financing. So some time to register a company if the administrative process is in fact closed. So in fact, you have a number of practical issues that are not easy, and you have a situation where it's of course very, very sensitive for everyone. So the negotiation, of course, take longer, because if you want to have a good alignment of interest and a win-win transaction, it means that you need between buyer and seller to have an alignment on the perception of what's going to happen in the market in the next 2-3 years and after that. And at the moment, it's never easy, but for sure, it's far more difficult at the moment.
Just to pick up something you mentioned earlier, and that is the importance of the domestic market, which we've heard referenced today several times, and the volume of the domestic market, which again, I think some people are not quite aware of how significant it is, even though, you know, everyone else that's used to working in more mature markets knows that typically the domestic market is over 80% of demand. You mentioned the importance of the domestic market, but also a sort of value for money positioning that goes alongside it. Do I understand you correctly that you are looking at that sort of bigger piece of the cake, the piece that actually is occupied by Accor, or has been occupied by Accor traditionally, where you're in the budget to select service part of the market? Is that what you think represents the most interesting opportunity in Africa at the moment?
This is the next big step in the market in Africa, for sure. And this is like every other market in the world, that's a normal development of a market. So from the 5-star targeting a very typical profile of clients, international travelers, then you extend and you propose an offer to cover all market segments. And this is a very natural move. And this will be a very big move in Africa. So if we try to be positive, we really believe that the COVID-19 will just accelerate this and will help people in hospitality industry, clients, and people from the government and authorities to have a better understanding on the importance of this market, and how in all these circumstances to facilitate and to help, and hopefully the discussion again that were existing prior to the COVID-19 crisis, to see how they can accelerate this, and that will be then at the end will be a good news if this is going to happen. Then of course we still believe that There will be on the upscale and luxury segments, there will be some opportunities. There is still need to develop some infrastructure in some countries, and we will also look at that segment. So it's not one against the other, but really the core focus and what will be a game changer in the market, we believe, is the domestic on economic mid-scale segment.
And Olivier, I'm conscious that we're getting to the end of our slot here, but just so I make sure I understand, would you look at growth platforms where partners would be doing a build out or a rollout, or are you fixed on looking at existing trading assets only, a mix? Has your strategy changed in that regard?
No, our strategy, I mean, we are equipped with a great team combining expertise of people coming from the private equity and investment in Africa, and people coming from the hospitality and construction. So we have the expertise. Kasada, we look at opportunity, we put in place the financing structure. We can build or renovate or reposition or extend properties, and then we do the asset management, the management agreement being with Accor. So in fact, we at every pillar we can partner with a number of people. We can co-invest. We are happy to engage with people when they can deliver to a certain key contract, if they have the good level of reference and professionalism, or we can discuss with hotel owner and then provide all the necessary expertise to take the responsibility during all construction phase of the project. So we try to really to be a solution provider with different type of expertise that we can mobilize, but at the same time, we again, even with a lot of commitment, even with the support from Accor and the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Qatar, even with the great team we have, I mean, our plan to develop 40-50 hotels in the coming years, brownfield and greenfield, is not something that we can do it just on our own from our office in Johannesburg. So this is where, of course, in the different part of the continent, it's so important to have the right partner on the ground. So that's really what we're looking at. And probably to answer also your question, some evolution between greenfield and brownfield. For us, our commitment in terms of ESG is really part of the DNA. So the job creation and the training was really a key part. And probably the reality now is that we have to go more to job preservation and more brownfield. This is how we adapt to the situation.
Olivier, it only goes for me to say thank you very much as always for joining us, and really good to hear someone talk so optimistically in what is obviously a challenging time. I wish you well, stay safe, and I hope very much to see you in Johannesburg at some point in the future. And thank you on behalf of us all for joining.
Thank you very much, Nick, and looking for it. Thank you.